Volume 2 of Stranger Things 4 has finally released, and now that the dust has settled, let's take a look if the conclusion to the season that brought back my love for the show lived up to the standard of excellent set by Volume 1. Spoilers ahead for the finale of Season 4. First, we'll check out what was good and bad about Episode 8 and 9, the series as a whole, and a few theories about what is to come. I have to say that the upload schedule was a really odd choice, with the first 7 episodes coming out all at once, with a little over a month wait before the final 2 episodes dropped together. I imagine this was done to build hype, and even though I only had to wait a few days since I waited to watch it, the climax of Episode 7 had me expecting a much faster pace than Episode 8 delivered. I really did like the opening with Nancy fleeing from Vecna with some really creepy moments, and it does actually show exactly what comes to pass in Episode 9. The bad guy revealing his evil plan is a little bit played out, but it is in line with Vecna's confidence in his superiority. There are some interesting reveals in the Russian prison, and I like this sort of secret government research, but the captured part of the Mind Flayer is a bit beyond what I believe is capable from this base, given how every Russian is murdered after any character with a name has left the facility. Unfortunately, the pacing really slows down after this point as it returns to the other characters. Will delivers his best performance in his speech that both encourages Mike and reinforces his importance to Eleven, simultaneously expressing his own life experiences and feelings for Mike. Great writing and delivery. Unfortunately, I can only conclude that Mike is a soulless robot as Will begins to cry, and apparently this is noticed by Mike, but he just goes back to what is really important to him. Fortunately, Jonathan wasn't stoned for long enough to notice this, and that he needs to be there for his brother. Back in the lab, we see that Eleven has finished her training in the hyperbolic time chamber and has leveled up enough to believe she has what it takes. Dr. Brenner, however, disagrees and uses sci-fi's second best analogy right behind poking a pencil through a piece of paper to explain the situation to the audience. The gang devises a plan to kill Vecna, and Steve delivers his one day from retirement speech, only for the show to subvert my expectations by not killing him immediately after he says this. I see this as an absolute win for Steve Bros. The Russia crew returns to pick up Chekhov's flamethrower and then head back to fight the monster at the prison. Argyle is quickly becoming one of the most useful characters, and Dr. Brenner reveals that he's actually Badman again. Loved his performance and that Eleven didn't give him the closure that he wanted so much. I have to say that as much as this series has been abusing the orange and teal color scheme, I absolutely love the cinematography. Overall, Episode 8 was pretty good, putting all the pieces in place for the final battle, although I felt it was a bit slow in some parts, and I think that a lot of these scenes could have been established earlier in the series. The rumors of the final episode being over 2 hours long was true. Seriously, there are movies coming out that are shorter than this episode, and I have to say that doing interesting things with timings with streaming episodes is something that just other shows aren't taking advantage of. Hopper reveals he is now a Buffman, and we get a sneak peek at what kept Johnny Depp around for 3 years.
Nice.
The gang arrives in the Upside Down with a prepared, coordinated, and intelligent plan.
Nice.
It is a little bit contrived that just the right townsperson notices and contacts Jason so that he can shop later to introduce tension, but it's okay. And we get the title screens 10 minutes into the episode. Argyle, recently promoted to the second most useful character in the California crew, delivers a solution to their problem in 30 minutes or less, or it's free. Oh, and fun fact here, this guy is actually credited as Argyle 2.0. I really liked how the characters communicate through the dimensions using information that they'd previously gathered. Although I really do wonder what Vecna was doing, perhaps just chilling out in this room, when Max confronts him. Mike and Eleven get a sweet pre-fight moment as the show delivers the biggest jump scare.
Surf shut, Romeo.
That's insane. That's blasphemous. Putting fruit on pizza?
Unfortunately, Mike and half my audience expose themselves as brainlets, not realizing that tomatoes are in fact fruit. They're berries, by the way, just like bananas and watermelons. But do you know what really aren't berries? Strawberries.
Whoa.
Jonathan remembers he's in the show long enough to give his big brother speech that Will so sorely needs at this point, and the ritual begins. I absolutely loved this transition between reality and Vecna's curse, where for just a moment we wonder if Lucas is really having doubts about Max, leading into what will hotly be debated as the best or second best scene in the entire franchise. Back inside Max's mind, we get a really cool scene. Her dream starts to decay as Vecna begins to catch up to her. Speaking of catching up, this show subverts my expectations once again, as an adult is shown to be able to catch up to a small girl running away, something that I was led to believe was impossible from a certain other show. The drama begins to ramp up as the tentacle's moist undulations intensifies. Hopper catches a demidog naked on laundry day, and Eddie contracts a fatal case of character development as he leads the bats away to give Dustin a chance to escape. Jason shows up to fulfill his role of breaking the cassette tape, as well as punching Lucas over and over in the demi-Borgans. Just when it all seems that all might be lost, Eleven shows up to begin her imagination fight with Vecna. I was expecting a line here from Max saying something to the effect of, "And now you know what fear really feels like." Unfortunately, Eleven makes the decision to throw Vecna against the wall instead of just paralyzing him in the air until his body gets destroyed by the others. I would have really liked to have seen a more creative battle here. They are dueling inside the realm of imagination, and literally anything could have happened. Was hoping for more of a back and forth with mental tricks, not knowing what was real and which one of them was really in control. This scene felt a bit wasted as we are served the standard telepathy battle, throwing people and objects around the room. I did like though that Max didn't just stay on the sidelines. In fact, one of my favorite parts about this episode is that everyone really had something to do, instead of just standing behind Eleven as she screams, like in the other finales. Inside Vecna's mind, Max is almost out of time, but Eleven buys a few more moments by mentioning Papa's death. Eleven begins to realize her role in all of this as Vecna monologues his evil 5-year plan. And there are some neat details here that I like. Vecna is missing an eye and having a broken arm, which goes back to his inspiration from the D&D Undead Vecna Lich, which is an interesting read if you have the time. Now this is the part of the episode that I like the least story-wise. Vecna shows how the Upside Down was before his arrival and how he found what becomes the Mind Flayer, and even shapes it into something new. Eleven learns that it was him all along, as he states that all he needed was someone to open the door. To me, even with the retcons, this doesn't make a lot of sense, as the Series 1 Demogorgon was seemingly able to cross between dimensions at will. I have heard some people explain that this particular Demogorgon was the one that Eleven touched, and it imparted some of her powers into it. But if this is the case, then surely the Hive Mind would have been able to use this creature to strategically open gates rather than just have it cross over into Mirkwood whenever he was out of fresh meat. Vecna is also completely hypocritical, as he hates how humans order things and wishes to become the apex predator, only for him to arrive in a completely alien world and start transforming it into something he prefers, not even mentioning that humans are infinitely more effective predators than spiders. Hypocrisy is a common trait in villains and indeed real people who claim to be against whatever they are condemning, so I can accept this, but I don't really like it as a twist. I much prefer the earlier implication that Vecna is somewhat of a 5-star general of the Mind Flayer. Prior to this episode, my headcanon was that the Mind Flayer was the leader and entire entity of the Hive Mind, with Vecna striking a deal to survive within the world, but retaining his own free will and making him a valuable asset to the Hive Mind. And when the tentacles connect in the ritual, I saw this as him joining briefly with the Hive Mind to amplify his power and connect with the normal world. It makes me wonder if they're setting up for a kill Vecna and then Eleven merges with the Mind Flayer to return it to neutral moment in the final season, whenever that is. I can understand that they're going for a more human villain that can have some interactions with the characters, but for me, the more alien and bizarre elements of the villains was one of the show's most appealing aspects. Mike gives his power of love speech while also saying that his life didn't start until the day he met her. Will is somewhere in the blurred background crying, I can only assume, but this gives her the power she needs to break free and use her signature move. And holy crap, Max is actually taking some damage. This show isn't playing. The final fight begins on 3 fronts as the show's other contender for greatest of all time scene swells, just like Kate Bush's bank account. I seriously love this scene so much that I don't even care that the Demogorgon just forgot it was invincible up until the moment that Hopper picks up the sword. The moment is all too short, unfortunately, as what is lost begins to dawn. Best boy and girl dying as Vecna escapes wounded from the attack. The 4th chime plays and the plan comes to fruition as the tears begin to appear.
First hangover feels like you're gonna split in two.
Damn, how's that for foreshadowing? And this is where things get a bit haywire for me. I can't decide if it's going to be a key point in the next series, or if the Duffers just didn't have the stones to let Max go, as Eleven uses Force Heal to start her heart again, but not as effectively as Ray since she is put into a coma. It's worth remembering that Vecna consumes what he kills. Their memories and powers are taken inside him, so we can assume that Max's personality will be locked there in torment until season 5. Time skip, and everyone has arrived back in Hawkins, and this also feels really weird, since the gates were presumably opened for a moment and then went back on a break for 2 days so that we could have our main cast reunite scene. And fearing another what about Barb moment, the Duffers give Eddie's uncle some closure in a stunning performance by Dustin. I do like most of what happens during this 2-day break, I just wish the parts were fit in a bit earlier. If I had to rewrite this, I would have Max not die in the house, but 2 days later in the hospital, that way the heroes could have reunited and did everything they needed to until she flatlines and the gates begin to open with a much smoother transition into the final scene where the Upside Down arrives in Hawkins. I think if Max had died for good in this episode, as much as I love her character and acting, it would have made for a much stronger finale. I'm just not a fan of fake-outs or ever returning characters from the dead. It did have some problems, but I do think they stick the landing. I loved a lot of the small details like Eleven leaving the door open 3 inches and the fact that the final scene took part in the wildflowers that she loved so much. Some amazing moments, but not quite as compelling as Volume 1. I think they probably should release them all together or once a week. The break between them really built up too much hype for what was delivered. So what is next for Stranger Things? First and foremost, hopefully a better haircut for Will, but apparently we're going to be in for another time skip, so let the film theory begin. We will almost certainly see Eleven battling back into the Red Mindscape to search for and rescue Max's soul before she can come out of that coma. Vecna, as I mentioned in the previous Stranger Things video, is based on a lich from D&D. And there are 3 interesting little points here that I'd like to talk about. The first, I'm still convinced that Vecna's clock is his phylactery, the item which contains the Lich's soul and prevents them from death until its destruction. I'm sure a lot of people recognize this as the idea behind the Horcrux in the Harry Potter series. It really makes me wonder why the kids didn't at least attempt to destroy the clocks in both the Upside Down and our reality, with as much as we know about Vecna and the significance of the 4 chimes. The second is that, as Dustin mentioned in Series 2, one way to defeat a Mind Flayer is with an army of undead. Zombie Eddie confirmed? Alright, that one's a bit of wishful thinking perhaps, but the original D&D Vecna was slain by its undead bodyguard Cass, who betrayed him, and we never really did see what happened to his body, so just saying. Although, if the Mind Flayer really is just a neutral ball of dust living carefree in the sky, it's interesting to think what will happen when Vecna is destroyed. It is possible that Eleven will have to sacrifice herself to merge with the Mind Flayer to return it to the benign state. Vecna is also known as a deal maker and the Chain God, so a possible trade to restore Max's soul is absolutely on the table. Wait, a deal with God to get him to swap our places? It also interests me how the Upside Down has effectively cut Hawken into 4 parts, and I could absolutely see each of the original 4 party members leading a team to take out 4 different bosses, but I'm pretty sure that someone isn't going to make it out this time. If I had to guess, it'll almost certainly be Will, and I still expect him to develop some sort of powers and go out as a hero. It would be a perfect arc for his character to end up landing the killing blow, whether it be by throwing a Molotov or actually casting Fireball, Hawkening back to that first game of D&D from Season 1. This show has really been doing a great job at foreshadowing thus far, and the painting he drew just depicts the first 4 of them in battle, with Will the Wise casting something. Our dragon as the enemy might not be the actual creature that we see, but it would fit as the final of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. But let me know your theories below. I almost have more fun just thinking about the possibilities than I do with the actual reveals, but we'll have plenty of time to do so before the final installment is out. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, and until next time, see ya.